Hello and welcome to the Your Parenting Mojo podcast. In this episode, we're going to draw threads together from across a number of recent episodes. Most obviously, it picks up on our interview with Dr. Moira Miklajak, where we discuss parental burnout. After that episode concluded, Dr. Miklajak and I emailed a bit about tools that could potentially help parents, and the primary one that she found useful was the idea of self-compassion, and that's what we're going to discuss today. This topic also picks up on our conversation with Dr. Chris Niebauer about the stories that our left brain tells us by giving us some concrete strategies on how to do that. And it builds on a conversation we had about 3 years ago with Dr. Brandon Ozawa da Silva on the topic of compassion. We also touch on issues related to patriarchy and go deeper into some of the mindfulness tools that Hunter Clarke-Fields shared with us recently. And here to do all of this with us is Dr. Susan Pollak, who's a psychologist in private practice in Cambridge, Massachusetts. She is a longtime student of meditation and yoga and has been integrating the practices of meditation into psychotherapy since the 1980s. Dr. Pollack is co-founder and teacher at the Center for Mindfulness and Compassion at Harvard Medical School and Cambridge Health Alliance, and has just stepped down as president of the Institute for Meditation and Psychotherapy, a position that she held since 2010. She also writes regularly for Psychology Today on the topic of integrating mindfulness into daily life. Welcome, Dr. Pollack.
Thanks, Jen. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So we're going to talk a lot about your book because it's on the topic of self-compassion for parents. And one thing that I really liked as I was reading through your book is the idea that it isn't a manual for self-compassion. It doesn't teach you step by step what self-compassion is and then how to apply it. I loved what Dr. Chris Germer said in your foreword, and he said, I'm going to quote, "The book connects with the direct experience of parenting through detailed examples, personal anecdotes, and elegant exercises to transform parenting struggles through the tools of mindfulness and self-compassion." So that said, we're definitely going to be digging into some more of those things as we go today. But I'm wondering if we could start by having you help us to understand what is compassion, and from there, what is self-compassion, and also this idea of mindful self-compassion that I know is really important to your work.
Okay, and let me first just respond to your kind words, because my feeling is there's no recipe for parenting. And I know you're a parent. I am a parent of 2 kids, and as of just a week ago, a grandmother.
Congratulations.
Thanks. So I think it's really important for your listeners to realize that one size doesn't fit all.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not going to be able to give you a recipe for how to be the perfect, compassionate, mindful parent. You know, you have to figure out what works for you and what works for your kids.
Yeah.
So, that said, let me jump into just some really workable definitions. And let me tell you, I really don't like psychological jargon. So let me speak in English. So,
Okay.
one way to understand compassion is to really look at the root of the word, which is Latin, and it means to suffer with. Okay, so that's kind of theoretical. What it means in real life is to really see somebody and to connect with their pain,
Mm.
or the difficulty they're having. So, self compassion, and this is a pretty radical concept, is learning to be kind to yourself. Again, it's that simple. So many of us, present company included, were not raised to be kind to ourselves. So it can feel weird, awkward, foreign, like, what? Be kind to myself? No, no, I have to push myself. I
Mm-hmm.
have to drive myself. What are you talking about? Um, so for me, that concept of being kind to myself felt foreign. And again, an easy way to think about it is when you're having a hard time, think about what you say to yourself.
Mm.
And I don't know if your inner language is like my inner language, but to be very self-disclosing, I used to say, "Oh, Susan, that was stupid," or "Oh, Susan, um, you're an idiot, or, oh, how could you have said that? You really blew that. So it was this constant soundtrack of criticizing myself.
Mm.
But think also what you might say if a friend told you that, or someone you really cared about, that she had done or he had done something similar to what you you did.
Mm-hmm.
And you probably wouldn't say to your friend, "Oh, John, that was so stupid. I
Mm-hmm.
can't imagine you said that. How could you have done that? What were you thinking? What is wrong with you? You are such a loser."
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, if you said that to a friend, you probably wouldn't have many friends. Okay, so we do know how to respond kindly. You would probably say, "Look, John, you're human. We all screw up. Everyone as a parent, let me just kind of stick to the topic of parenting here. Everyone as a parent has really bad days. Those Alexander, that book that I've loved, Alexander and that No Good, Terrible, Awful Day. I mean, we as parents have those terrible, no good, awful days. But, how nice it would be if you could say to yourself, Jen, that was just a really rough day. We all have it. It
Mm-hmm.
happens. Don't beat yourself up. That's not going to solve the problem. Let's move on here.
Mm-hmm.
Or even better with the child, okay, let's make a repair. Let's say sorry. Gee, mommy really lost it. Or, I used to say with my kids when I was having a hard time, oops, mommy hit the roof there. Let's take a time out or a time in
Mm-hmm.
to repair. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so that's our definition of compassion.
Mm. And actually, if I could pause just there for a second, as you were saying, I wasn't raised with this way of thinking. It made me realize none of us were. And it seems to me as that though it's coming from this Protestant work ethic, right? That if you work hard enough, you will be able to achieve. And if you're not working hard enough, that's probably why you're not achieving. And so the only thing to do is self-flagellate and work harder.
Exactly. And supposedly, I know you're also interested in culture and cross culture
Mm-hmm.
issues. Supposedly, in other countries, there isn't as much self loathing and
Mm.
self flagellation. Because I remember hearing this story where the Dalai Lama's translator was translating question like, okay, so what are we supposed to do if we hate ourselves? And he'd say, what?
What do you mean?
What do you mean if we hate ourselves? And the translator and the Dalai Lama went back and forth and back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
This is how the story's recounted. And he had the hardest time understanding why people would hate themselves, why there was such loathing. But I am with you both in terms of the Protestant work ethic and also patriarchy. Like,
Yes.
you have to drive yourself.
Yeah.
Okay? You can't be lazy. You can't slack off.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where that inner critic comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, you screwed up, you idiot. What is wrong with you? So, so anyway, just to touch on the importance with those three definitions. The other thing I want to draw on in terms of compassion, and this, I know you're a research geek as well, so this will probably interest you. One of the pieces of research when they're looking at in an fMRI, a brain scan of what happens with the brain on compassion, is it seems to activate the motor neurons.
Mm-hmm.
So compassion is tied to action. And I remember when I was writing the book, I tried to use this headline saying, compassion is a verb because it's active.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the editor, being an editor, said, no, it's not. So anyway, so I let that go. But if we can think of compassion as active, basically, how can you respond? How can you tune in to what that person might need, or what that child might need, or what you might need in the
Mm-hmm.
moment? That is really the essence
Mm-hmm.
of what a compassionate and self-compassionate response is.
Okay.
Now, do you still want a definition of mindfulness?
That
Is
would be
that
awesome. Yeah.
number
And
one?
specifically the mindful self-compassion. Yeah.
Okay. So, what happened in terms of the mindful self-compassion, and I love to give credit where credit is due, is Kristen Neff was really the first researcher to do research on compassion in 2003, had begun to write a number of essays and articles um, framing this new construct that she called self-compassion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my friend and colleague, Chris Germer, who wrote the foreword to the book, thought, whoa, this is really important. And also, I need this. And, so many
Everyone
people
we
in
know
the
needs
world,
it.
yeah, needs it. And they connected and put together this program. And I know you'll have references
Yeah.
to their books and the 8-week course
Yeah.
and their books on self-compassion. So mindful self-compassion acknowledges that we need to start with mindfulness. And I've been teaching this course for over a decade. A lot of people just can't start with compassion. Again, going back to what I was saying, in that it's foreign for most of us
Mm-hmm.
to treat ourselves kindly. But it seems that if we start with the foundation of mindfulness, then people can be more open to compassion. And in fact, again, some of the research is now saying that one of the secret sauce of mindfulness seems to be this element of accepting without judgment,
Mm-hmm.
warmly, kindly accepting. So now let me segue into a definition I like, and this is very hands on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so again, I don't want it to be abstract. So the easiest thing to do is do this with me. Raise your hand if you like, and just wiggle your fingers. Okay, so mindfulness, very simply, is knowing what you're doing
Mm-hmm.
in the moment. It's nothing woo woo. It's nothing, fanciful. It's nothing weird. It's
Mm-hmm.
just present moment awareness with kindness, without judgment. So
Mm-hmm.
you're feeling your hand. You're not saying, oh, Jen, you're such an idiot for, wiggling your fingers. You just say, okay, I'm sitting here, moving my hand, feeling my hand. Again, being present in the body, and we'll talk about that as well,
Mm-hmm.
without judgment.
Mm. Yeah. So I'm not looking at my hands and thinking, oh, my hands look really big in the picture.
Right. Or, oh, I
Yeah.
don't have a manicure,
Yeah.
something
Well,
absurd like
never
that.
had that, but
Same here.
yeah, I've heard Joseph Goldstein explain, what is mindfulness, this big topic. And he says, sit and know you're sitting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's that simple.
Yeah. And I think I saw in your book actually a quote from Sharon Salzberg that I really liked. It said mindfulness doesn't depend on what is happening, but is about how we are relating to what is happening.
Exactly. Exactly. And
Yeah.
I think that really says it all. And a lot of people keep coming back to the fact that it's not the external circumstances, it's really the inner experience
Mm-hmm.
of how we are dealing with what's happening to us. And as Joseph, let me just sort of make a link between those two teachers. As Joseph Goldstein would say, what is the attitude in the mind?
Mm-hmm.
Is there resistance? Is there aversion? Are you saying, oh, poor me? Or are you saying, okay, this is what's happening?
Mm-hmm.
And he puts it wonderfully again, which is anything can happen to anyone at any time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's maybe make this super concrete for parents. You talk in the book about diaper changing,
Yeah.
which is a task that most parents have done once or twice. There are some parents who manage to take a different path with it, but the majority of parents are doing a decent number of diaper changes through a period of some years. And you described a mindful diaper change. And if anyone who's reading your book and knows anything about resources for infant educators or RIE will read that description and they'll just think, this has so many parallels to the idea of it's called want something quality time in RIE. It's the idea that even caregiving tasks, which we're typically society trains us to, and we think of ourselves as things we just need to get through them and then we can do the fun stuff at the other side, we can play with the baby. But actually even these caregiving tasks that seem even if they seem unpleasant to us, there's still opportunities for connection. Can you maybe draw that out a little bit in the way that you see it?
Sure. And I also want to thank you because, as I mentioned, my son and daughter-in-law just had a new baby, and I got baby just
Practice.
got back from the hospital recently, and I got an email from him saying, "Oh, change 7 diapers today." And you sent me a wonderful link that I thought was so moving, and I'm sure you want to include that in the show
Yes, please.
notes, where the writer really talks about respecting the child.
Gosh, I
And
want to know who it was. Do you remember?
Thackeray, is that it
Oh.
was
Hmm.
in the email you sent me. I googled it and then sent it
Okay.
to my son, and I thought this is so moving,
Mm,
because how often do we ask a child's permission? And
yeah.
she said this is really a very intimate moment.
Mm,
And I felt like it was really setting the stage for wonderful parent child interaction where, um, you know, there's this respect
hmm.
for the child even at 3 weeks. So the
Yeah.
example she gave was with a 3 week old baby.
Hmm.
So anyway, I thought that was a gem. Um, one of the things I try to do in the book is say basically, look, guys, you know, we're going to be changing diapers for years. We're going to be folding laundry for years,
Hmm.
and we're going to be washing dishes for years. So rather than having what Joseph Goldstein would call a version of these tasks,
Mm,
what if you try to find something new and interesting in the
hmm.
task? I mean, for example, with washing dishes, if you wash dishes with a child, the child will say, "Oh, look at the bubbles.
Hmm.
Oh, they're rainbows in the dish bubbles. Oh, this is so much fun. It feels tickly." So your child isn't going to be narrating a diaper change. But if you use that as a chance to connect with the child and show a little love and tenderness and respect for the child, then that can really change your experience of the diaper, rather than, oh, it's so smelly. Oh, I hate it. Oh, I won't breathe. It's like, okay, let me use this as an opportunity to really be intimate with the child, to really show some love, maybe to sing a song, maybe to laugh, to smile, to giggle.
Hmm.
So, again, that in many ways is really what mindfulness is about. Like, how can we bring some freshness to this? How, rather than being on automatic pilot, can we say, oh, the baby's smiling? Oh, what a sweet baby. I'm so happy to be with this child,
Hmm.
rather than, oh, I can't wait for this to be over. So so basically you're not losing moments of your life because of your dislike of a task.
Yeah. And I do want to be cautious not to kind of make parents think that, well, for every single diaper change for the rest of your child's diapering career, we need to approach diapering in this mindful way and you need to be totally focused on your baby. I mean, it seems as though there are times when just kind of getting through it is needed, maybe
Or an
even desirable.
accomplishment. Absolutely. So no guilt, no shame. Again, not to be graphic, sometimes our kids, I'm sure your kids and everyone else's kids, had a diaper disaster, or
Oh,
what we
yes.
sometimes called a
Remember most of them,
poo-poo-rama,
yeah.
which was a total mess. Okay, so you're not going to find joy in
Mhm,
that. And I don't expect anyone to find joy in that. And you just want to get that over
mhm,
with. But how can you be as present as possible most of the time?
mhm,
Okay, so we're not talking about 100%, but maybe just showing up so you're present.
mhm. Okay. All right. So I'd like to understand a bit more about kind of why we do this. And I know you know that we're very focused on scientific research on the show, but also not being a slave to the research and really calling out where the research is falling short, where the
Mhm.
questions we're asking are not helping us to address the issues in the way that potentially it would be helpful to understand them, or the way sample sizes are taken don't really help us to really get to an understanding of the issue. And when I look at the research on self-compassion, particularly mindful self-compassion, it's correlated with a whole bunch of things that sound amazing. Positive affect, reduced anxiety and depression, well-being, life satisfaction, emotional intelligence, reduced procrastination,
Right.
reduced perfectionism.
Increase of
um,
happiness in relationships,
yes,
less PTSD.
yes.
It's almost too good to be true. In fact, one one person who named Mark Leary, who was looking at all the research, said, it's almost getting boring. So
I can
so
imagine.
positive. Um, so yeah, and
But
again, but
it's correlational in nature, right? We can see a lot of things that vary together. A lot of these research studies are done with super small sample sizes, often with undergrads, and then they're kind of extrapolated as if they are applicable to all mankind.
right.
I think we have the best evidence from Dr. John Kabat-Zinn's work, but
Hmm.
mindful self-compassion only forms a very tiny aspect of that entire program. And
Oh,
so
he
I'm
actually doesn't do mindful self-compassion. I've an MBSR teacher as
mhm.
well as an MSc teacher,
Okay.
and it's not part of the traditional MBSR program. He
Yeah.
does teach some compassion on the retreats, but he doesn't teach mindful self-compassion.
Yeah. Thank you for teasing that out. And it's been a little while since I read this research. My recollection was that the teachers were kind of conveying it tacitly through their interactions.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. So all of that said, given all these amazingly positive things that it's associated with, and we want to have happen, and given that there's very, very little, if any, experimental evidence, what do you take out of this in terms of understanding to what extent it can be helpful through what we can know about this through psychology, as well as through your personal experiences and your professional experiences and so on?
Sure. So let me tell you from two perspectives. One is personal perspective,
Hmm.
and the other is as someone who has taught mindful self-compassion for over a decade. So my personal perspective is I started meditating at a very young age, in fact, in elementary school. So I have a lot of years of serious, hardcore
Mm-hmm.
meditation. But I was still mean to myself.
Hmm.
Okay. I still drove myself. And, just as an example of how much I drove myself, um, I, I pushed myself to get 3 Harvard degrees. And you can just imagine how driven and obsessional and, compulsive you need.
Mm. And society sees you as a success for doing that.
Right. Exactly. So I bought in, but I still had that really harsh critic going on. And when I started studying self compassion, more than studying, practicing, I wasn't as mean to myself. I could really be a lot kinder to myself and also my children and my family. I wasn't nearly as driven.
Mm.
So that was a big shift for me. And I know you mentioned Sharon Salzberg. Um, there's one point, she tells this story many times, but she was also really, really driven, um, and really hard on herself. And there was one point where she was practicing loving kindness or metta
Mhm.
phrases. And she thought, this isn't working. It's not making any difference. And there was one point where she knocked over a teacup or a teapot, and usually she would berate herself. She'd say, "Oh, Sharon, you are such a klutz. What is wrong with you? You're terrible." Instead of saying that, she said, "Sharon, you're a klutz, and I love you.
Mm.
I love you anyway." And I felt that was really a wonderful summation of the shift. It's
Mhm.
not that um, the critical voice stops entirely.
Mhm.
It's just that we can modulate it. So we can say, okay, we all break some. That happens. I'm not a bad person. So that was my experience similarly. Like, okay, I screw up, but I'm not, a terrible person and
Mhm.
human. And that's actually one of the components. If depending on time, I can, be happy to teach a mindful um, self-compassion break for parents
Mm.
when things are rough. Um, and Kristen Neff talks about that as being common humanity. Like we all have hard days.
Mhm.
We all break teapots. We all screw up. When I began teaching this, and it's an 8-week course, people can take it online. I mean, these days, no one's doing anything in person, at least not here.
Mhm.
Um, I noticed that the people I was working with, and it's either 8 weeks or 5 days intensive, were having a shift. They were being more forgiving, more understanding, of themselves. And one of the reasons I wrote the book for parents is I felt like it made a difference in my parenting.
Mhm.
I wasn't as harsh with my kids. And to really come into the present moment, I work with a lot of parents in my practice right now. And parents are so stressed with COVID. I mean, here they are trying to work their jobs during the day, if they're lucky enough still to have a job. So many of them are being teachers for their kids and then not getting any sleep.
Mhm.
And often their kids, you know, don't want to do school on Zoom or don't like their teachers and say, well, Mrs. Smith is a much better French teacher than you are. And you say, I'm sorry, I studied Spanish. I don't know French. Or, oh, mom, you can't teach music and art. It's like, hey, I'm trying the best I can.
Mhm.
So I think self compassion right now in this moment is a lifesaver.
Mm.
I mean, the parents I speak to say, this is impossible. This is endless.
Mhm.
This is breaking me. It's not sustainable.
Mhm.
So, one thing that can really help is really giving yourself a break,
Yeah.
not having that voice saying, "Oh, Jen, if only you were smarter. You would have studied French and Spanish and Russian and Chinese and be able to teach that
Yes.
and piano and
Mhm.
and art. Like, what is wrong with you?"
Yeah. And I would have remembered to turn the heating off because I'm worried it's going to interfere with the sound right now. And I would have remembered to ask my daughter to stop running up and down outside the room, which hopefully you can't hear. And
Hey, this is
yeah.
life.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm wondering then if you've sort of answered my question, and I'm going to try and see if I can pull this out a little bit further. So when we're thinking about doing research on psychological treatments and outcomes, and how a person or a group of people responds on average to a certain treatment, what the reason we're doing that is to say, should we spend our time and energy on this treatment, or would it be better to spend our time and energy on another treatment, and money as well a lot of the time? And since this is, I mean, it's essentially free, or no, your book's not quite free, but it's it's fairly low cost in the grand scheme of psychological treatments, and the actual
Well, my
implementation of it.
website is free, so if people want to listen,
Yes,
to
there are resources
meditations,
there.
they're free.
Yes, and Kristen Neff actually also makes a lot of resources available for free as well. So there are potentially extremely low cost ways of getting into this, and the time investment is not huge, and the potential benefit is actually quite large. So maybe we can just say, does it really matter if there are large scale studies validating the outcomes of this particular approach, and just say, well, I could try it and see if it works for me, and if it does, then I could keep doing it.
Exactly. And I don't know if you agree. I feel like the research on mindfulness per se is solid. And I
Mm-hmm.
know
Yeah.
Kristen Neff, the self compassion researcher, is really trying to make sure that her research has as much integrity
Mm-hmm.
as the other as other research. But yeah, I mean that's a wonderful question. We could go off down the research rabbit hole in terms of what's needed to make the research better, and a lot of people are saying the self studies should be thrown out because that's not valid.
Right.
But we won't go down that
We
rabbit
won't.
hole.
We'll restrain ourselves.
Yes.
So I'm thinking about some of the ways in which self-compassion can be most useful. And you talk in the book about how normal it is to have moments where we just can't stand our children. Or we feel embarrassed by their behavior in public, or maybe we're
Yep.
disappointed that they either can't or won't pursue some goal that's super important to us. And then we realize, oh, I shouldn't have done that, and we feel terrible about it afterwards. Can you help us understand, why is this a universal experience, and how can self-compassion help here?
Well, let me go very briefly into the history of psychology. And I'm sure people have heard of Carl Jung, who was, along with Freud, just an incredibly important thinker.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things he said, and this is a paraphrase, is that one of the greatest burdens for a child is the unlived lives of the parent.
Yeah.
So often, what's happening when we want a child to pursue something is that we wanted it, or our parents wanted it
Mm-hmm.
for us, and we never got it. There's actually a story in the book of this little boy who had some developmental delays, and his dad wanted him to be a major league
Mm-hmm.
athlete, and it just wasn't happening. And there was a situation where the kid was at Little League, and, bases were loaded, and he struck out and lost the game for the team. And the dad went ballistic.
Mm.
And he was so upset with his reaction that he needed to talk about it. And as we unpacked what was going on for him, he realized, just like any archaeological dig, that there were layers upon layers
Yeah.
upon layers of his hopes and dreams and fantasies for his child. So my feeling is 2 points. The more we can be aware and conscious of what we're carrying,
Mm.
the burden, the baggage we're carrying, um, the better we can be. And so many women, again, this may lead us into our patriarchy discussion,
Mm-hmm.
are obsessed with their bodies
Yeah.
and their weight and the bodies of their children, particularly their little girls.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be the historical point. The the self-compassion point is just say, look, can I let my kid be who he or she or they are,
Mm-hmm.
rather than imposing my dreams. Can I work through my fantasies, my shattered dreams, and not insist that my kid fulfill these dreams,
Yeah.
not
And
burden them.
yeah. And I think it's especially powerful in mothers because we know we're not supposed to have these feelings towards our children, right? We're not supposed to experience anger. Well, because we're women, we're not supposed to be angry or aggressive or feel cruelty or hatred towards our children. And I think you discussed in the book, and I've also seen it discussed because I was an English major, about this is where the stepmother role in literature came from, because
Mm-hmm.
we couldn't acknowledge that a parent of a biological child could feel these things towards their own offspring. And so if someone was going to feel them towards a child, it would have to be somebody who is not biologically related, right? Because we couldn't tolerate that within ourselves.
Right, because we have no, anger or monstrosity
Right,
or hatred within
right.
ourselves. And in fact, that was a revelation for me. And shortly after my first child was born, people came to say congratulations. And one of my mentors, um, and he was a Freudian mentor, said something that really took me back. And he said, Susan, mark my words, but there will be a time when you will hate your child. And it felt like, speaking of literature, it felt like, the witch at the christening,
Mm-hmm.
like giving you a curse or giving you some coal rather than a wonderful little, present.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, what? And I didn't want to be
Not
rude,
me.
but it was like, I wasn't going to say that's not going to happen to me because then he'd
Right.
say you're in denial.
Yeah.
So I just thought, thank you very much. And then when that did happen, and it was, sooner than I would have liked, I thought, well, that's not going to happen till adolescence,
Right.
right? When
Yeah.
everyone knows. Um, and it was actually really helpful because it was like, oh, okay, we all have difficult emotions.
Mm-hmm.
We all get angry. We all get frustrated. Let me see what's going on here.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just pause and see. And just having that sense of common humanity, we all get angry, we all get frustrated, doesn't mean I'm bad, doesn't mean my kid is bad, doesn't mean we can't repair this. Just made me go, okay. And I just heard a wonderful comment by a Zen master just yesterday when I was listening to a talk, and he said one of the things he was working on was coming to grip with, as he put it, his own monstrosity.
Mm.
And he said, all those fairy tales and stories and myths we read, those are us. You
Mm-hmm.
know, those are beings, those are parts within ourselves. And I thought, yes. And how reassuring it is for parents to realize that, yeah, yeah, we all we all lose it. And especially now in these times with COVID, when people are stretched so thin and we're dealing with grief, we're dealing with loss, we're dealing with illness, we're dealing with financial stress, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, juggling two jobs, not sleeping, the more we can say, yeah, I'm on overload.
Mm-hmm.
This is too much.
Yeah.
Let me take a break. Let me be kind to myself here.
Mm-hmm.
The better we're all going to function.
Mm-hmm.
And we, passing this forward, it's going to be a good model for our kids. Because then our kids will say, oh, okay, this is what you do when you're feeling overwhelmed. This is what you do when you're angry.
Mm-hmm.
This is how you can care for yourself because life gets overwhelming. And it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
All it means is that I'm 100% human.
Yay for that. So I'm wondering then if we can maybe start to work through some of the ways that we see these things happening in ourselves, and then maybe we can talk about how we can some tools we can use to respond to that. And you sort of alluded to the potential for walking us through some exercises. So
Absolutely.
Okay, so so we mentioned the P word, the patriarchy word, and I know that you are a massive fan of Carol Gilligan's, and that you consider her to be a friend and mentor. And so for listeners who haven't heard the episode that listener Brian Stout and I recorded with her, it's one of my favorites for sure. And it really it starts to help us see how patriarchal culture has impacted the way that we are in the world. And a big part of that, and how that's linked to what we're talking about here today, is the idea of our bodies having information for us that's actually useful. And I think that this kind of separation has occurred for many of us, myself included, where I see in myself a lot of traditionally masculine in air quotes qualities, like thinking and reasoning, and those are really prized in our culture, and the feminine, air quotes again, qualities of sensing and intuiting are not prized. And so it's not even anyone necessarily has to say to us, don't pay attention to it, because we focus so much on the logical rational, the rest of it ends up just kind of falling by the wayside. And I only discovered this for myself, I mean, literally in the process of reading Dr. Gilligan's book and talking with her and talking with Brian about it, that the idea that my body could have anything useful to say about my experience.
Right.
So yeah, so for parents who are in the same boat, just figuring this out kind of as they're listening right now, where do you even start understanding this?
Well, since we've been talking about patriarchy and, our philosophical tradition, let me just insert a quote from Descartes,
Mm.
because I was English and philosophy student, which is basically, we think, therefore we are.
Right.
Okay? So we
Yes.
get the classic
You're cutting across your
Cartesian,
neck here.
yeah,
Yeah.
Cartesian mind-body split.
Yeah.
One of the wonderful things that Carol Gilligan has done, as have a lot of mindfulness um, and meditation teachers, is bring the body in.
Mm.
And just quick aside, the early work I did with Carol is in her first book, In a Different Voice.
Oh, no kidding. I've read
Yeah,
it.
chapter 2. And what I was doing is looking
Oh.
at gender differences
Uh-huh.
between men and women
Yep.
in terms of violent fantasies. But
Mhm.
again, I won't go down that rabbit hole. But if people are interested,
Yeah,
in a different voice.
I'll link to it.
Yeah, thank you. So, and that ties in so well with patriarchy,
Hmm.
which is that women are not supposed to be in touch with their bodies.
Hmm.
And Carol writes about this a lot in her early work. It's too sexual, it's
Mm.
too dangerous, it's too threatening. And again, this is more, um, Judeo Christian culture, less so other cultures where women can be powerful. Anyway, so let me use that as a way to take you into a practice
Mm.
which involves some self compassion for parents
Hmm.
and also involves listening to your body as a resource.
Okay.
Okay.
Hmm.
And again, just one quick quote because I was trained as a dancer. And this is from Martha Graham.
Mm.
She said, "The body never lies,
Hmm.
and the body never forgets." And as someone who also now does a lot of work with trauma, accessing the body is such a powerful resource. Again, because the body doesn't lie and the body doesn't forget.
Yeah.
So the more we can tap into our bodies, the more we can reclaim our power and our voices.
Hmm.
Okay. So let me guide you through. Now, should I come up with a hypothetical difficult situation for a parent, or do you want to feed me one?
Any hypothetical situation is good. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure you have a vast library to draw on.
Okay. Let me do one that's really common
Okay.
and that drives a lot of parents crazy. So let's say, you know, your kid dumps the spaghetti on the floor or
Hmm.
dumps the spaghetti with red sauce on a sibling's head
Or on the
or
couch where it won't come
or on
out.
the white
Yes.
couch
Yeah.
or whatever.
Hmm.
Basically the kid makes a mess. Okay. So this is three points, and I used to teach this as sort of a meditation. And then actually, Yael, one of your podcast
Hmm.
guests, was at a workshop, and she said very kindly, she said, Susan, I have three kids. You are teaching practices that are 3 to 5 minutes. And with a great deal of kindness and humor, she said, I can't sit down. I can't close my eyes.
Hmm.
If I did, somebody would kill somebody else, which I thought was brilliant because yeah, you have three kids. There's no time to sit still. There's no time to close your eyes and meditate. So these practices now, thanks Yael, are adapted for in the moment with kids who
Hmm.
are difficult. Okay, so let's just say there's a spaghetti dump on the couch. Okay, you feel yourself about to blow up, scream, yell, have a tantrum, whatever. And your kids are looking at you to see how you're going to respond. Okay? And you're standing up, your eyes aren't closed, they're open. What you do, and I'll guide you through this, is you just take a deep breath. And you may even want to put a hand on your heart or a hand on your heart and belly or two hands on your heart, wherever it feels comfortable. And the first thing to say, and this is bringing some mindfulness in, is Jen, okay, this is a difficult moment. Okay. And then maybe another breath. All right. Perhaps even feeling your feet on the floor as you try to bring your anger and rage down.
Hmm.
Okay. So, point one, this is a difficult moment. Point two is then bringing in Kristen Neff's point about common humanity, which would be Jen, parenting is rough on everyone.
Hmm.
Okay. There's no such thing as a perfect parent. Every parent has tough moments or a terrible, awful, no good dinner day. Okay? You are not alone in
Hmm.
this. And then just let that settle. See what that feels like. Often when we hit this stage, people go like, ah, yeah, yeah, I'm human. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Every kid can make a mess
Hmm.
when they're eating or throw food. Yep, that happens. And then the third step, and this is really bringing the compassion in, and I've tried to really make this accessible for parents, is okay, can I be kind to myself?
Hmm.
And again, as we've talked about, a lot of people did not grow up in a culture or a family where they could be kind. That's okay. You can say, may I set an intention to be kind to myself? One of the moms I worked with who was furious at her child couldn't say that. And she said, maybe in the next millennium, I can be kind to myself, or maybe in the next incarnation, I'll be kind to myself. So you just set the intention like,
Hmm.
okay. And then if you can't even do that, you may want to think, all right, what would kindness look like?
Hmm.
You know, it's too hard to give it to myself. It's too hard to imagine that it could happen in my lifetime with this kid. What would it look like? So and this is on my website so people can follow, but it's basically three steps. mindfulness, common humanity, and self-compassion or kindness. This is a moment of difficulty. There are so many moments of difficulty in parenting. I'm not alone. And may I think or imagine what being kind to myself might be like.
Mm-hmm.
So just checking in. How was that? How did that feel for you?
I feel like I've just taken an emotional deep breath as well. And I want to be sure to clarify for parents, if these particular phrases don't resonate with you, use whatever phrases make sense to you.
Exactly.
If you can't say to yourself, parenting is hard, parenting is really freaking hard right now.
Or one of my parents said, if it's okay to use this language, this sucks.
Yeah.
This is shitty. I mean,
Yes.
use your own language. I'm just using sort of appropriate
Mhm.
podcast language here, but
Yeah.
make it your own. And
Yeah.
there's
And
one
heartfelt.
example
Yeah.
in the book of a mom who really makes it her own.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
And
just trying to be appropriate.
and so just to take that forward the next step, if we can take 30 seconds while we're still in our children's presence, we still have our eyes open. I mean, I can imagine you even doing it in 20 seconds. Then if we can bring that self-compassion to ourselves, we also put ourselves in a position to change the way we respond to our child, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And, in an ideal situation, you don't want to be yelling at your kid or,
Mm-hmm.
hitting your kid or spanking your kid or saying to your kid, as many parents have done, you have to eat every strand of spaghetti on that floor.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't eat it now, then you're having it for breakfast.
Right.
And if or lunch. I mean, so you don't want to go into that, as we say in the psychological literature, monster mutter, the monster mother
uh,
who, becomes very punishing. It's
mm-hmm.
like, okay, let it go.
Mm-hmm.
Let it go. Let's move on.
It seems like we're getting dangerously close to the idea of equanimity here.
Well, and maybe not so dangerous. So,
Yeah, I was being facetious. So for some parents, that may be the first time they're hearing that word in this context. Can you help us understand what is equanimity in this context, and how does it help us when it seems like, the spaghetti incident is the 15th thing that's happened today?
right. And you've had it. Okay.
Yes.
So again, translating it into real language, equanimity is just finding some balance.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you've lost it again and again and again. How can you get back in balance?
Mm.
So it's as simple as that. And especially in these times where so many parents feel thrown off for the 15th, 20th, 125th time in the day, how can you recover?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, experts will say, take a bubble bath or, have a mani-pedi,
Uh-huh.
facial,
Practice
and
self-care.
practice self-care and, go for a run. I say bullshit. One more bubble bath is not going to help.
Mm-hmm.
But practicing, trying to get some balance really helps.
Mm-hmm.
And um, do we have time for another quick
We
practice?
can make time, yes.
Okay, so let me give you a choice here. There are two practices that I like. One is from John Kabat-Zinn, Mountain Meditation, where you get this image of a mountain through all the seasons,
Mm.
and the mountain stays steady and calm no matter what the weather.
Mhm.
The other practice I really like is something that the Dalai Lama taught thousands of people, and it's a practice of um, really finding some peace in the storm. And that may
Mm.
actually be a good
Let's do that
COVID
one.
practice. Okay. So as an entry into that, there's a meditation teacher named Dara Williams who had a phrase
Mhm.
about COVID that I like a lot.
Mhm.
And she basically says, yep, the seas are rough for everyone. and we're not alone in feeling the rough seas. However, some people are on a yacht, some people are on a dinghy
Mm-hmm.
without, any wave stealing
Mm.
of steering. So it's not, we are in it together, and this takes us into a, politically important conversation.
Mm-hmm.
um, our resources are not the same.
Mm-hmm.
We are not all weathering this in a yacht, and there's economic inequality and racial equality.
Yeah,
I
thank you for bringing that up.
just because it's just
Yeah.
so important.
Yeah.
Um, okay, and this is a practice we can do in about 3 to 5 minutes again.
Sounds
Really
excellent.
quick. This one you may want to close
Okay.
your eyes, but let's say you really need some grounding, and it's the 215th time that something has happened. You can also, you know, if you have no one who can cover for you, you can do this with your
Mm-hmm.
eyes open. So just imagine that it's a beautiful day. You get an image of a harbor, the water's calm, there are boats in the harbor, the sun is out, very, very peaceful. And then just feel that in your body. Again, we're just really trying to bring the body in here. And just feel that quiet, that peacefulness in your body. And this is a really nice way to counter the anger and anxiety, just finding some quiet in your body. And then imagine that suddenly the wind shifts and a storm suddenly blows in. The skies darken, there's storm clouds, there are white caps on the ocean, and this boat in the harbor is getting tossed around with the waves, the winds, the rain, the gale force winds. And just imagine, if you like, imagine you have scuba gear if you want. You can drop below the waves. Just slowly letting yourself drop down into the quiet and the stillness at the bottom of the ocean. And as you do that, just tune in to what you're feeling, to any thoughts, emotions you might be having, and just feel like you can let that go. And just dropping down a little more deeply, letting go of any tension or tightness in your body, perhaps even noticing where that might be. Perhaps it's in your eyes, your jaw, your neck and throat, shoulders, letting yourself soften your fingers, your belly, relaxing your back, down to your legs and feet. And then just allowing yourself to rest here for a moment or two, feeling that you have some distance from the storm, some space from the turbulence, that you are not the storm, that there's a place you can go to find some quiet, to find some peace. And then just feel like you can take this in, that you can feel this calm, this quiet throughout your entire body. That you can really feel this as a resource you can return to whenever you need to be back in balance, whenever you just need a few moments to replenish. And then when you're ready, no rush, just slowly come back. But know that this resource is available whenever you need it.
Mm. Wow. Thank you for that.
How was that?
Oh my goodness, that was I needed that so much. Yeah, I mean, I could imagine for parents who are really in it with parenting right now, that I mean, parenting is the thing that's creating a lot of stress for me right now. I'm recording a lot of videos. I'm getting things ready for my membership group, and many hours of speaking and recording every day. And it feels like my brain's going a mile a minute, and there's so much I have to do. And to be able to stop doing that, and to step aside from it, and to know that it's not going anywhere, but that I have these 5 minutes to reconnect with my experience of what it is to be here, to be in this human body right now. It just feels so calming.
Yeah. And it's so interesting. We're really taught, I mean, this goes back to Carol Gilligan's work,
Mm-hmm.
not to be in our bodies
Yeah.
and to disown our bodies in many ways.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what you did there was you sort of walked us through a little meditation without us even using that meditation word. And I think there's a tendency for people who are new to meditation, myself included, to think that it's sort of this, I'm just going to sit here and try not to think. And since I'm a person who thinks nonstop, then clearly I'm not going to be a success at meditating.
Right. And so many people are worried about failing, and that's such a common misconception.
Yeah.
And, people will be relieved to know that it's not about stopping our thoughts, because that only happens when we die. It's really about finding a different relationship to our
Mm.
thoughts. So rather than getting caught in the storms of life
Mm-hmm.
and, swirling around in that tornado of hurricane of anger and
Mm.
bitterness and resentment, we learn to just drop beneath it.
Yeah.
You don't have to live there. You
Yeah.
don't have to live in that rage.
Yeah, in taking it back to Dr. Chris Niebauer's words of, these are the stories that our left brain is telling us, most of which aren't even true. It's something our left brain just kind of makes up based on the available information it has to suit, it has to integrate it in some way. It has to make sense of it. And so it makes up a story about, oh, well, my husband didn't unload the dishwasher, so he's lazy and he doesn't care about our relationship, and he's not making any contribution to our family. And we can latch on to those things, and it can become something that we get really caught up in, or we can detach from that and understand what is my experience in this, and that maybe connecting with him and his experience would be a more productive way of approaching that, rather than the story in our left brain.
Right, or the
Approach.
larger perspective, which is one of the other things equanimity does, which is,
Mm-hmm.
well, what else did my husband do today?
Yeah.
Well, he made dinner and he took the kids to school, and yeah, okay.
Yeah. There's another side to this story if we can move just beyond the dishwasher incident.
Exactly.
So yeah, so I think for parents who are thinking about this and they're thinking, well, I mean, this is another thing I have to remember to do, and well, what would you say to parents who are thinking about this and thinking, yeah, sounds amazing, but I'm not even sure how to get started? I mean, there's a book that can help them with this, right?
Well, and also one of the things I'm trying to do is not have, self-compassion be something else on the checklist,
Hmm.
along with
Yeah,
like working out.
yeah,
It's something, again, and I've been trying to make this so accessible, something you can do in, 3 breaths,
yeah,
or in 30 seconds or
yeah.
20 seconds, or standing up, you know. So it's not taking any additional time. And I like to say to people, look, you're breathing anyway, you know.
Wait, let me check. Yeah, yep, still doing
Still doing it.
it.
And one of my meditation teachers once told me, she said, you can shift your mind in 3 breaths.
Mm,
I mean, you can shift your emotional state in 3 breaths.
mhm,
And it was like, really?
mhm,
Really? And it's true.
mm.
I mean, I feel often that just one breath, feeling one inhalation and one exhalation can really make a huge difference.
Yeah. And so for parents who are looking at their daily lives and thinking, this is completely overwhelming. My kid wants my attention all the time. I have to be with them on Zoom school for many hours a day, and I have work to do and a partner who needs some attention, and everything seems overwhelming, and we can get stuck in these narratives of I can't do it all. I'm not enough. That we can just, I mean, in the space of 1, 2, 3 breaths,
Yeah.
we can change the way that we see the situation, which, I mean, it helps us, right? It helps us to find a different path, and to respond differently to the people around us, which helps them respond differently to us, and makes our life easier in 1 to 3 breaths. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah. And just to make it easy for your listeners, on my website, there's a whole bunch of audio meditations they can do. And one is, just on 3 breaths.
Yeah. All right. Can you
So,
mention where your website is and where people can find more information about you?
yeah, it's drsusanpollack.com. And
Okay.
I think I sent you the link, and we can
Yeah,
just
yeah. We'll put it in the references
have
just for
that.
the people who don't want to go to the references page. I want to make sure they had the right place to go so they can
Sure.
go find you. So
Yeah.
yeah, so thanks so much for walking us through these super concrete tools. And I also want to give a shout out to Dr. Yael Schonbrun as well, who introduced us and was kind enough to make the connection. She listened to my back catalog as well, and she said, you know who you should talk to. And so thank you for making that connection. And I'm so grateful to you, Susan, for sharing your wisdom and expertise through the book to reach so many parents, and with us as well today, and really taking these ideas and turning them into things that parents can actually use today in their real families with their real children.
Sure. And one closing comment, just
Mm,
sort of passing it on. You may want to talk to Kristen Neff. She's doing some interesting new work on fierce compassion,
mm,
and she has a child with special needs. So
mm-hmm,
that may be a topic.
mm,
Um, I know it's a topic that she talks about, so that may be of
mm.
interest.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks very much. So all of the references for today's episode, including a link to Dr. Pollack's book, Self-Compassion for Parents, Nurture Your Child by Caring for Yourself, can be found at yourparentingmojo.com/self-compassion.